go. Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah. It's that time.
Howdy, fellow Ligonierians and fellow Americans. I guess I can use that term. This is what I understand is called a flash mob, and it's very appropriate. You know, Americans are funny about our flag, and foreigners do not understand that the same flag that will fly on a battleship also flies over a car dealership every day. That it's used as a bandana on a motorcyclist's head, and that it's used to wrap a coffin of a soldier who is brought home. But it's a special flag, and it's meant freedom, and it's meant deliverance for many countries. And it's not a flag that goes somewhere and then stays. It goes to do the job and comes back home. On this day, 200 years ago, our capital, Washington, still lay partially in ruins. All the government buildings had been put to the torch by British forces. At one point, our president had 2 pistols stuffed in his belt and was fleeing into Maryland to escape the British troops. On this day, the British had now turned their sights on Baltimore, and they planned to reduce the city with their fleet, with a bombardment, if they could get past Fort McHenry. And on this day, a lawyer from Maryland named Francis Scott Key had gone to treat with the British to release a friend of his who had been made a prisoner during the earlier fighting on the march to Washington. He negotiated successfully with the British. Things were done in a very gentlemanly way in those days. But the British realized that he knew what they were up to, having been aboard one of their ships. And they didn't want to let him go back and tell them that they were going to bombard Fort McHenry. So they, in a gentlemanly fashion, told him he would have to stay aboard one of their ships until after they had captured Fort McHenry. And indeed, the British had decided that Francis Scott Key would be the ideal person, a very gentlemanly fellow that he was, to actually negotiate the surrender of Fort McHenry. Things didn't turn out that way. On this day, a bombardment of Fort McHenry began. A bombardment that lasted all day and into the night, with Fort McHenry returning the fire. And at that time, almost every war, there was always a new weapon. There was a very new weapon used in that bombardment. They were called Congreve rockets. Instead of a shell fired out of a cannon, these rockets were merely set up in sort of, I guess you could call them little slides, and the rockets were ignited and fired into the fort. These rockets were not very accurate, and they were not very effective, but they certainly made a beautiful, if you would like to call it that, red glare in the skies as they flew over and into Fort McHenry. Well, I think we know the rest of the story. Despite the bombardment, which Francis Scott Key watched at times with sinking heart, Fort McHenry did not capitulate. And the next morning, in the place of the weather banner, which was a smaller American flag that had flown all through the night at Fort McHenry, to show their defiance of the British, they raised the huge Star-Spangled Banner that some of you may have been fortunate enough to see is now in the Smithsonian Institution. And we can proudly stand here as a nation 200 years later. And the British finally got it out of their system that we weren't going to be a colony again. And we can stand here as proud Americans, proud of that flag. So we just wanted you to come here today. That's an act of patriotism, and we're never ashamed to be patriots. And now we're going to pledge allegiance to that flag. I'm so thankful that the Scouts are here as well to see this. And then Janet Formato is going to lead us a cappella, and we will sing the Star-Spangled Banner. Will you pledge the flag with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you. We want to thank the DAR for remembering this and having this celebration today. We're so thankful to them. And thank you, everyone.
That'd be great.